when we say cardio, I think in layperson's terms, we're all thinking our endurance, but how does that really affect the heart? And when we talk about heart health, cardio is going to work on the endurance of the heart, and resistance training is really good at working on the ability of that heart to be strong. Because at the end of the day, our heart is a muscle. So just like you're training any other body part, the muscles have capability of producing power, being strong, being good size and having mass, and then having good endurance. And all of these things depend on what you're trying to do functionally. But if you're just trying to go for heart health in general, I think it's important to have both resistance training and cardio, or anaerobic and aerobic, in your routine.
Welcome to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger, where we help you bridge the gap between pain and performance. Each week, we'll share strategies, insights, and real-life applications to help you keep moving and stay driven. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Movement Driven Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movement Driven Podcast. I'm Dara here with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Greg.
What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing good. So we are actually, for those of you who are listening, we are attempting to move into video. So today we are recording in person, not just online. And there's going to be a little bit of video clips as far as teasers goes, but we are working on video for our podcast listeners who like the video elements. We will have that to you shortly. But today we're just going to kind of go for it. And then Dr. Greg and I are both in person chatting it up. And today we're going to talk about cardio for heart health. February is Heart Health Month. Lots of love this month, lots of hearts this month. So we kind of want to talk about that a little bit in depth, or just at least scaling the surface of what we can talk about for what, our knowledge of heart health is. So let's just kick things off with what is resistance training and cardio, and what does that mean from a PT's perspective?
Yeah, I think this is important for people to understand. Just anybody anybody who's trying to be healthy, really, but anybody who's definitely into fitness. I hear this all the time of people really don't know the difference between the two in terms of how they impact the body. And I think even cardio itself, I got to make cardio. And I'm like, okay, what's your cardio, right? Is that aren't you on a cardio machine? What is a cardio machine? I think cardio is this term that we use to describe what we would refer to as aerobic training versus anaerobic training. So I think it's first, we got to kind of define what those two things are. So aerobic training is what we think of as cardio, our long distance running, our elliptical, our biking, or swimming, our endurance training. And that's where we're using certain systems, where we're using oxygen in a certain way, and we're working endurance of the heart if we're talking about heart health. When you change that over to resistance training or anaerobic, the body is going through short bursts, and then it's not necessarily relying on oxygen demands the same way. It's using different energy systems to burn, glycolysis, and using carbs versus burning fat for a long period of time. So when we say cardio, I think in layperson's terms, we're all thinking our endurance, but how does that really affect the heart? And when we talk about heart health, February being Heart Health Month, when you talk about heart health, cardio is going to work on the endurance of the heart, and resistance training is really good at working on the ability of that heart to be strong. Because at the end of the day, our heart is a muscle. So just like you're training any other body part, the muscles have capability of producing power, being strong, being good size and having mass, and then having good endurance. And all of these things depend on what you're trying to do functionally. But if you're just trying to go for heart health in general, I think it's important to have both resistance training and cardio, or anaerobic and aerobic, in your routine.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a personal note on that, so I'm not a marathon runner. I don't do half marathons. I've done the gate a few times, which is a 15K here in Jacksonville. And, I eventually would like to maybe do a half marathon. But when I started to talk to my coach and programming of what I could do, and talking to you about it as well, it wasn't just I'm going to give you this map of how many miles you're going to run per day for this amount of weeks, this amount of times per week. There was, we'll do some sprints, but we're mostly going to be focusing on power and strength training. And I think that's important for especially our runners who are listening, who just ran the Donna half or full marathon and are getting ready to run the gate next month. Something to consider while you're doing your training is that resistance training as well.
Yeah, definitely for the next year. That's what you need to gear up. And from the PET perspective, for me, resistance training can have the multifactorial benefits. I think cardio is good. You need the cardio in your routine. You need the aerobic training, especially if you're a runner, obviously. to improve the endurance of the heart to be able to last a long time. But functionally, the heart responds. I mean, think about what you're doing on a daily basis. You're not moving all day. You're doing individual tasks. So even if it's a day where you're doing outside chores or you're playing with the kids or you just need to lift something and climb up a flight of stairs, that's all anaerobic resistance training type thing. So your heart needs to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And then kind of back to your saying, or what I was saying before, the resistance training with that multifactorial benefit is also getting to the point where now we're training our muscles and our musculoskeletal system to prevent injury. So obviously that's where my head is always at,
Right.
especially when we're talking about our runners. I had a runner this week. I won't call her out by name, but she has been a runner for 10, 11 years. She has some hip pain. She's had knee pain in the past on the same side, and there's no resistance training in her programming. So that's a big reason why she developed this injury. So when we're talking about injury prevention, we obviously need both. When we're talking about heart health, we need both for sure.
Yeah. What is a common misconception of why people think resistance training does not count towards heart health?
Yeah, I don't know where it really comes from, but I think people just think I'm just doing this one little thing. How is it helping my heart? I'm doing resistance training for a set and then I'm resting. But the heart needs to be able to respond, just like I said, functionally. We do things functionally. We do one activity and then we have time to rest. And so when we're doing that, we're also increasing our ability for the heart to return to resting heart rate quickly, which is a really good indication for health in general and longevity. I think the resistance training can have a much better benefit on managing blood pressure, right? Because you're really putting a lot of load on the heart, and it's trying to adapt to that by taking in those stressors and responding to that. Resistance training is shown to have better effects on insulin activity. So we're talking about our diabetics or preventing that kind of stuff. Resistance training is really good. I think I read a study a few years ago where they were looking at specifically at lipid profiles. So your HDL, your LDL, your cholesterol and ratios. And they found that groups that did resistance training often had better lipid profiles than people who only did cardio, even though the diets were remarkably similar and the control group was comparatively similar in demographic to the experimental group. The people that did both had better lipid panels and all that kind of stuff too. So, and obviously that leads into heart health,
right?
Pretty directly.
Yeah.
So, the misconception I think it's just a lack of education, and I guess that's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So for you ladies listening out there, a cardio bunny versus a muscle mommy, you kind of want to be able to be both. Is that what we're saying here?
Well, and then we can bring that to weight loss, right? Like, so we talk about the insulin stuff. You have a much better impact on improving your metabolism when resistance training is there. So to that point, I've seen studies where resistance training alone versus cardio alone is much better for weight loss. So if your main goal is weight loss, resistance training should be in your program just as much as cardio. I think both need to be in a well-rounded program.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch gears just a little bit and talking about that exercise selection. So we talked before we recorded about that compound versus isolated movements, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you touch on why that impacts cardiovascular demand?
So we're talking about compound versus isolated movements. Let's define those first. Compound meaning you're going to be doing a full body movement, a deadlift, a power clean, a squat, versus isolated bicep curl, knee extension on the machine. We're doing isolated muscle groups. When we are recruiting more muscle mass to produce movement, your heart has to work harder. So we're seeing larger spikes of heart rate during the lift itself, which is going to lead to better heart health. And we even see things like, for instance, I think one of the reasons swimming is so valuable, when you're using smaller muscles in the compound type of exercise, such as swimming, where we're doing a really big movement over and over again. Now that is more of an endurance exercise, and that fits more in that aerobic category. When you're using your smaller muscles while you're swimming in your arms and like letting the legs chill, you're going to use your heart at a much higher degree than if you were using your legs because of the size of the muscles themselves. They've looked at patients warming up on a bike versus an arm bike for PT specifically. And the patients that are on the arm bike have much higher spikes in heart rate than when you're using your legs. Some of that could just be a deconditioning thing, but I think a lot of it is smaller groups of muscles need more effort actually to produce that same force.
Yeah. I wasn't a big swimmer when I was in high school or anything, but I did swim a little bit in college and just for for extra cardio was like a big thing for me. And I do remember anytime that I would just be, in my lane, and then I would do the exercises where I held the, I forget what it's called now, but I held the piece between my legs so that I would focus.
Foam and
Yep. And then
just float there.
Yep. And then vice versa with the board, where I would be kicking with just my legs and not doing, that was always part of the routine to kind of balance out and keep like those two separate areas, strong and being able to do it all together. So I think, overall, I think this is an important thing to talk about. And we can obviously talk about this a little bit more later on in the year when we do have some guests come in to talk more specifically about this. But just in general, it is important to have that balance of both for your heart health. So if you're going to be, training for a race or training for, any kind of competition, or just training for life and just want to keep up with your kids as they're learning how to walk and like running all over the place, it's just important to have that heart health balance.
Yeah, I think the main, like you're kind of alluding to, the main thing we're trying to get across here is well-rounded programs are better for heart health, they're better for musculoskeletal health as well. I always tell my people, like, if you're a CrossFitter, get some yoga in your life. If you're a runner, get some CrossFit in your life. Yep. If you're just a yogi, get some strength training in your life. The more well-rounded your program is, the better it'll be. And so to that point, if you're only doing cardio machines, start to shift over to some of those resistance training machines as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Greg. I think this is a great episode on heart health. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. But again, we will be back next week. And if you're in the Jacksonville area and you need a movement assessment or a movement specialist to help you and guide you with what kind of programming or routine might be best for you, or what kind of balance you can find, you can follow us on our social medias, or you can visit us at movementdriven.com. Send us a submission for a discovery call. You can talk to Dr. Greg and get all of that set up, and we'd be happy to help you. So thanks, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the Movement Driven podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Want to see how we're helping people in Jacksonville bridge the gap between pain and performance? Head on over to movementdriven.com. Until next time, keep moving, stay driven.